The first question is coming from the domain Linux. And the question is, your EC2 instance is running out of disk space. What actions will you take to mitigate the issue? So it's not directly related to EC2 instance. As you know, we are focusing on the Linux problem here. We are trying to focus on the debugging capacity of a DevOps engineer here. And this can be asked in the interview. Think about how you will answer this by pausing the video if you wish. But now let's go and see how to debug this issue first. To understand this, we have to understand a few fundamentals first, and let's see what it means. When we are speaking about EC2 disk space, we are typically speaking about EBS volume, like you're aware of. And the question again points to EBS volume. What we would like to understand is which of our EBS volume is having an issue, because the question said that the EC2 instance has a disk space related problem. There can be multiple EBS volumes attached. Hence, we will first try to understand out of our multiple EBS volumes attached, which one is having an issue. You can see here, there might be a root EBS volume, which has operating system related informations. We have application EBS volume, which will have our application related informations present. Now, if the issue is with our root EBS volume, then what are we going to do is we're going to check some logs in /var/log location to understand if this is full, or we are going to check temp locations if it is full, and other operating system related information on what is happening, what is filling our root volume. This is an important debugging step when it comes to root volume, because if the root volume becomes 100%, we will run out of actual disk space for our operating system, and then we have a higher issue of a shutdown of our machine. If it is not EBS volume, if it is not root volume, in this case, it can be our application volume. So if it is our application volume, then we are going to understand about what is this application volume getting used for. That is, our application might be writing some logs in certain location, or there was a new deployment and it was not clear. There might be a lot of jars that are pending. And because it is an application volume, we can play around a bit with it using some EBS features. So the first and foremost step is to take a snapshot. And after that, we increase this space of the EC2 instance. That is, increase the space of the EBS volume application volume. That is basically the EBS volume associated with the application volume. Okay, based on all the information that we are aware now, how do we answer this in the interview? To debug the issue with disk space, I would first understand which EBS volume is having the problem. If it is the root EBS volume, I would handle it a bit slowly because it deals with the operating system itself. And I would first like to check the logs and try to make some space for the operating system to function properly. If it is the application volume that is having an issue, I would check something related to the application directly. What was the recent changes in the application? Are there any error logs in the application that is causing a lot of logs to be filled? Were there any multiple deployments and jars were not cleaned, etc.? I would also check libraries that were just hanging out there without doing anything. And I would delete something, but we can take certain actions because it is an application volume. I will use the EBS feature, and I would first take a snapshot of this volume and then increase the volume capacity. Hence, this should resolve any of the disk space related issue on the EC2 instance. This is how you can answer this question in the interview. That is it for this video. We will discuss more about the interview questions in the next video. Thank you. The question is from the domain Linux, and the question is, what is a Bastion host or a gateway server? What role do they play? The question is not exactly from a Linux domain, like if you're expecting that they will ask some commands. Yes, they can. This is a general question that is asked, wherein if you have worked in any of the on-premises or cloud setup, you might have come across this word Bastion host or gateway server. Well, you can pause this video here and see how to answer them. Let me go ahead and first explain a bit about Bastion host and then let you know how to handle this question in the interview. In the example, you can see that we have a bunch of EC2 machine and we have some users. Let us consider that instead of giving all of these EC2 machines direct access, meaning people connecting from PEM file or from AWS console, we don't want to do that. Is there a good reason? Yes, because in some cases, what happens is these servers are considered to be a private server or private, they are inside a private VPC. So we don't want to provide a direct access to everyone. But still, it is required for us to give access because we want to debug, deploy, test, check logs, etc. So how do we handle this particular situation? The key point here is security and monitor the incoming and outgoing traffic. Well, that is where a Bastion host comes into picture. It is a server, basically, with some user-related configuration that it has clear roles defined that user A can access X, Y, Z servers or can do X, Y, Z actions. User B can access only X and Y server, etc. Well, needless to say, what we are trying to do here is to have a gateway to check, to monitor, and to make sure that only certain people can access our private EC2 machines, which are inside a private network. So what's the flow here? The flow is first, they are going to log in to the Bastion host, and that is validation number one. Later, from the Bastion host, they can SSH to another machine if they have access to this machine. If they don't have, they will not be able to access it, needless to say. What is a critical advantage of this piece of infrastructure or having a Bastion host setup is that if we want to cut off all external access to our internal server, all we have to do is destroy this Bastion host. The moment we destroy the Bastion host, what will happen is there is no connections that can be made from the public internet to our private network. If we want to reestablish, we can bring up this Bastion host again using the automation and reestablish this connection. But the critical piece of infrastructure that we want as part of security is right now in place. So what exactly is Bastion host? It is a server that is used to manage access to an internal or private network from an external network. Bastion host is also known as a gateway server, a jump box, or a jump server. Very well. How do we tackle this question in the interview then? Bastion host, also known as gateway server, is basically a server that manages access to an internal network or in our cloud or on premises. Certain kind of applications might require this design and Bastion host will come into handy. The critical role it plays is it controls the flow of the external traffic into our internal system via the server, meaning if we were to block all the external access, all we have to do is shut down the Bastion host server. That is it. This is how you can answer this particular question in the interview. Multiple EC2 instances in ASG, that is auto scaling group, is getting terminated. And this is causing downtime on the application side. EC2 pricing, Quota, all look good. How would you start debugging this application or this issue? So what are they expecting from you? They have already made a certain kind of debugging steps for you, and they're trying to tell you here that there is no issues with the auto-scaling group itself. And where could be the issue? Only thing that we are aware, the only factor that we are aware is EC2 instance is getting terminated. Based on this, how would you start debugging? Well, you can pause this video here to see how you would answer this. Let me go ahead and explain a bit of concepts regarding how to debug applications in this scenario. What we are aware is EC2 is getting terminated, right? And any EC2 instance to be getting terminated, we should know that it should become unhealthy. Only if it is unhealthy, then it probably will get terminated. What are some of the factors because of which an EC2 instance can become unhealthy? Some of the factors are disk space being full, and high CPU utilization. So if you're throttling 100% and there is no CPU for the operating system at all, then it could become unhealthy. Also, another issue could be no memory left. So these are the three possible causes that would probably be resulting in an issue with the unhealthy EC2 instances. To start debugging, the first step I would suggest is run the top command to see the CPU utilization and try to see what is the process that is occupying the CPU. In this case, you might realize that the application itself, the application that we are running, this could be a Java application, Node.js application, could be causing the CPU utilization. In this scenario, you go and call your developer and explain the use case, and they should see what is happening with the threading. This is one particular use case. Next use case that I would suggest or that I would start doing debugging is checking our disk space. So let me write it here. So disk space. So disk space is a factor. In this case, we have EBS volume. And what could have happened is this is 100%. And here I'm speaking about the operating system EBS volume. That is example /var/log or /tem or etc. So if this becomes full, then the operating system doesn't have any more disk space to operate, which will of course result in the issue with the our EC2 instance becoming unhealthy. The last stuff that we can debug here is the free memory left, that is the free space left. I'm going to write it here. Third one, that is we can run the command free-empty. This is a Linux command. This is going to tell us what is this free swap memory left. And if this is free swap memory is also 0, then we are having some problem because the application is trying to utilize all the memory of the EC2 instances. Based on the output of all of these three factors, I would recommend that we will debug the issue with the application, and that could be causing the actual termination of the EC2 instance, and hence auto-scaling group is continuously trying to restart the services. So to summarize it and to make it clear, what we are trying to say here is ASG, that is our auto-scaling group, is provisioning EC2 instances. But what is happening is because of our application, quickly this EC2 instance is getting into unhealthy state. And like we know, the moment it becomes an unhealthy state, the auto-scaling group again checks the state of the machine. It says that, okay, it is unhealthy, and it terminates. I hope you're able to understand the cycle in which everything is happening. So the solution is debug the application and debug the EC2 instance. That is the solution. These two are the solution. Very well then. So how do we propose this solution in the interview if this is asked? This is how you can try to tackle this particular question. Based on the information that you have provided, I feel that the autoscaling group itself or the AWS itself is not having any particular issue. The termination of the EC2 instances actually means that the EC2 instance might be getting pushed towards becoming unhealthy. This happens for multiple reasons, but let me share the top 3 reasons why it might be happening. One might be that there is a very high CPU utilization based on the application usage. Two, that there is no free disk space at all that we are trying to use. Three, there might be no free swap memory that is left. For the first one, for the high CPU utilization, I would probably log into one of the machine. Then I would see what is the highest process utilized. And if that process is from an application, I would reach out to this developer's team and try to get their help to debug the issue. For point number 2, if it is because of the common EBS volume that we are getting used, I would increase this EBS volume so that the operating system also gets enough disk space. The third one is the free memory issue. For this issue, that is the free memory issue, I would probably look into using a different type of EC2 instance, and I would suggest a different memory intensive EC2 instance to be used as part of this auto scaling group. This is how you can present this particular answer in the interview if it is asked for you during the time. Very well, that is it for this video, my friends. Hope to see you in the next video, and let us continue our journey in the DevOps interview preparation. Thank you. Create a Linux script that will push certain logs to S3 automatically. Explain only high-level design, which is enough. Share what all steps you would do to achieve this above script. Bonus, also the script should run at a particular time. It's a beautiful question, and I'm pretty much sure you might have come across this question a lot in the interview if you have attended certain interviews. Here, the important thing is they are expecting a high-level design. Okay, so you don't have to directly jump into Linux commands. You don't have to directly tell them how you are going to implement this. This particular question is also called as whiteboard design. So here they are trying to understand how well you think as an engineer, how well can you implement a particular code being an engineer. Let us try to implement this particular code now. So what do we want? We have a Linux server. And from this server, we want to push some data to S3 bucket. Okay, so how do we do this particular code in a Linux script? Let us understand this step by step now. Okay, this is going to be very easy if you follow the steps that I'm going to share. First step is I want to make sure we are using either IAM role or access keys, because our Linux server might not have the permissions to interact with S3. So first we have to understand this. If this is IAM role, we don't have to worry. If this is access key, we have to make sure it is configured on the Linux server, okay? And the next step that I'm going to do in terms of bash script is, the first and foremost step is, I'm going to start with shebang. That is the first step that you always write. So shebang. So this is going to tell which kernel we will be using. And the next step is, I'm going to start writing the commands, Linux commands to fetch the log files. And we can take the log files in any places. So let us assume it is in /var/log /application01. Okay, so all the logs here, right? So I'm going to take this particular path, and what I will try to do here is every particular time. So they want this script to be running at certain time, right? So now I can use AWS CLI commands, which you might have learned as a part of your AWS training. Using this AWS CLI command, I can do AWS S3 CP, origin. What is the origin? The origin is this particular location and the S3 bucket location. S3 bucket location. And I will combine all of these script and then prepare the particular script. There is a bonus question also, that is they want this script to run at particular time. For this, we can use Linux cron job. And you can configure this particular cron job to run at particular given interval, and it will execute this particular script. Whatever I explained you here is also known as a whiteboard design, like I shared with you earlier. You don't have to jump in and provide an exact Linux command, exact solution on how you would implement it directly. Go about explaining yourself in the interview how you would implement it. And that is what they want to understand from you. That is what they want to see as an engineer. Are you able to understand a given problem and create a blueprint in your mind to explain the interviewer how to probably will implement this particular solution? I hope it is clear. So how would you share this answer in the interview? This is how you can do it. Let me start by saying that I would begin with understanding if we are using IAM role or IAM access keys, because the Linux server by default will not have permission to interact with S3 buckets. So the next thing I would probably do is, once I know what kind of permissions is getting used and I have validated it myself, I would start writing my bash script. The way I'm going to implement the bash script is, first, I will start with writing the shebang, the normal thing. Then I would use a direct S3 CLI command, that is AWS S3 copy, and copy the particular file on my Linux server into the S3 location that has been specified. On a bonus note, which you have asked me, that the script has to run at a particular duration, I would use Linux cron job to achieve this particular result. This is how you can present this particular question. If they have shared you a whiteboard, just like that you are seeing on my screen, I would also suggest you that you present your answer in this way that I have shown, so that it can be a lot more impactful when you explain this particular solution in the interview. That is it for this video, my friends. I hope you learned something new in this video. Speak to you in the next video. Thank you. Why is logging important? What is centralized logging, and what tools helps to achieve centralized logging? I will try to explain first what is logging so that you have a clear picture of logging, but I'm pretty much sure most of you know what is logging. Logging is basically a type of recording the information for your application. What was your application doing at this particular moment, etc. Right? So it's recording a particular information. These records will be stored in the format of logs, which can be JSON. It can also be text, anything. Why is logging important? Because if you don't know what your application is doing, and if it is not logged, you cannot debug. So if you wish to debug or fix an issue, you have to have the logs, and these logs will be generated by your application. Let us take a simple example of an EC2 instance. This EC2 instance might be running an application, and this application is a simple web API. Now this EC2 instance, we have to use the logging mechanism. Where will the logs be stored? It will be stored in /var/log app.log, let's say, or app.txt. So here it all looks good, but the moment we move this application towards an auto-scaling mechanism, so now we have an auto-scaling group, and inside this auto-scaling group we will have EC2 instances. We are all aware that these EC2 instances are not permanent. They might be created and destroyed within seconds, within minutes. So if all the logs are now stored in this path, they will be lost when we lose the EC2 instance, right? They will be lost completely when we lose the EC2 instance. This creates a problem for us. When your application is deployed in a scalable manner, what happens is logs are also created in a scalable manner, meaning some part of the logs is on some EC2 instances, the other is on the other, so on and so forth. This will not help you to debug the issue completely. And to solve this problem, there is centralized logging. Now, AWS, you can dump this log to S3, CloudTrail, CloudWatch logs, or you can use Elasticsearch, which is also a good one, or you can use Splunk, which is the most famous one. Apart from this, we also have Datadog, which is also a log aggregator. I hope now you have understood what is logging and what is the requirement of centralized logging. Now, how do we answer this question in the interview? This is how you can answer this question in the interview. Logging is important for us to track the behavior of our application. But in real-time production, we will have our application running in a scalable manner, meaning our logs are also present in different machines at different point of time. To get a complete picture of the behavior of our application in terms of information, debugging, error, warnings, etc., we have to utilize what we call a centralized logging. If I were to be using an AWS cloud or any kind of cloud, we can use the inbuilt logging mechanism. In AWS, we have S3 or CloudWatch logs, or we can also explore Elasticsearch, Splunk, and Datadog. Centralized logging will help us to have all the logs in one place to make our analysis much easier and much faster, and it is one of the recommended ways if we have our application in production. This is how you can answer this particular question in the interview.